All right, so here is your geography review flip notes. I'm going to run through it very, very quickly. I have basically condensed all of your flip notes from this unit into about 15, 16 slides. I am not going straight through your study guide, but I am just going over like the main points and important points of each of the topics and civilizations that we've covered. So just make sure you use this. It will help you on your study guide, but just so you know, like, so you're not trying to follow along through every part of your study guide. I'm just going through everything we've talked about. So first up is the land bridge. Remember, this is how the first humans came over from Asia to North America. The water levels had dropped because ice formed, and then this land bridge was there. So the nomads, walked on over. Remember, they followed the mammoth, which is that huge hairy elephant. But then after a while, the climate became warmer and the ice melted, covered over the land bridge. They couldn't come over anymore. Next up, Mesopotamia. So this is the world's first civilization. It's known as the Fertile Crescent because everything, because of the soil there was so fertile and they were able to grow crops and thrive from that. Just know that civilizations are complex societies. They have cities, an organized government, art, religion, class divisions, and some type of writing system. Mesopotamia was also called the land between two rivers because of the Tigris and the Euphrates. You also have the Mediterranean Sea to the southwest, and the Persian Gulf is southeast of where Mesopotamia was located. Those two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, flooded often and left behind that rich, fertile soil that gave Mesopotamia its name. The flooding was very unpredictable, though, so they then developed an irrigation system to help with the flooding, because it would flood one year and flood the next and not flood the next, and it was very unpredictable, and farmers would either have great crop seasons or really bad crop seasons. So irrigation really helped with that. The first major civilization within Mesopotamia was Sumer. They ate dates and barley, and then each Sumerian city became its own city-state. So it had its own government, and it wasn't part of a much larger unit. Sumer also had upper, middle, and lower classes. They came up with cuneiform, also the Epic of Gilgamesh. They also invented that wagon wheel, plow, sailboat, the number system based on 60, geometry, and our 12-month calendar. And remember, Sargon came and conquered all of Mesopotamia, and his reign lasted about 200 years before he was conquered. And then also at that time, you had Hammurabi's Code, which was a collection of laws. Now we're on to ancient Egypt, where Egypt is located in the northeast part of Africa. It has the Nile River, which runs through the length of the country. And remember, it flows, it doesn't flow south, it runs north. So it goes up instead of down like regular rivers usually do. It begins in the mountains, and I have the mountains capitalized because lots of people kept putting Lake Victoria on their notebook quiz, but you need to know the landform that the Nile River comes out of, which is mountains, and then emptied into the Mediterranean Sea. The climate in ancient Egypt and Egypt today is very hot and dry because it is a part of the Sahara Desert. There is Upper and Lower Egypt. Remember, Lower Egypt is actually more north, and it's near the Nile River Delta, and then Upper Egypt is more south, and it's just this long, narrow strip south of the delta. The Nile River really was the lifeblood of ancient Egypt. The people only survived because of the Nile, because it's a part of the Sahara Desert. It's the longest river in the world. It was a source of food, drinking water, bathing, and it was extremely crucial for farming. Remember, there's the Blue and the White Nile that meet in Sudan, and the Nile River was known as a gift because of the annual flooding. You had your floodplain, which is a low strip of fertile land, and it was located on either side of the Nile. After inundation, which is means time of flooding, there would be this fresh layer of black silt left behind, and that was perfect for farming. You have like we talked about just a second ago, the Nile River Delta, which is about 150 miles of coastline, and then it's 65 miles total in length. It's a very rich agricultural region, and it's the most fertile part out of any other part of the land that runs along the Nile. Um, the south and the east borders of the Nile are the Sahara Desert, and then in the north you have the Mediterranean Sea, um, which all or those things helped with protection for the ancient Egyptians because people couldn't make their way through the desert. Getting through the sea could be rough. So they were really in a good spot and didn't allow for many people to try and come and conquer them and take them over. There are two sources of the Nile River. You have Lake Victoria and Lake Tana. The mouth empties out into the Mediterranean Sea, and you also, there's a river valley around the Nile. There's a river valley around the Nile. Of course there's. The word Nile comes from a Greek word which translates into river valley. Next up, we have that Indian subcontinent. It's located it's northeast of Africa. Northeast of Africa is Asia, and then that south central part of Asia is known as the Indian subcontinent. The civilization there was greatly influenced by the physical geography because it had the Himalayan mountain range, which was a natural barrier for protection, and then also had the Arabian Sea, the Indian Ocean, and the Bay of Bengal to the south. Again, just like with the ancient Egyptians, having the mountain range and the different bodies of water definitely help protect them. And because they were so isolated with these natural barriers, it allowed them to develop without any outside influences, and they really had their own thing going. One of the most important things that you need to know about the Indian subcontinent is the Indus River, which begins in the Himalayas and empties into the Arabian Sea. It was a site of many early settlements. You also had the Ganges River, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because I'm totally going to pronounce it wrong. But there were many other rivers that allowed for great farming villages because of that rich soil. Moving on to ancient China. Remember, you have inner China, which was ancient China, and then outer China is how modern China came to be, and then now it's all one. The rivers there provided water for the irrigation. Inner China had two regions. You had the North China Plain and then also the southern region. But in that North China Plain, you had that Hunghe River, which translates to China's sorrow, because as we know, when it would flood, it would be super destructive. So then they had to build dikes to help control that flooding. In the southern region, you had the Changjiang River Basin, where in that area it's more wet and warm because of the monsoons, and then also rice crops are grown there. You have the Zai River as well, which flows through the southern part of inner China into the South China Sea. And then the three main seas to know about China is the Yellow, East China, and South China Sea. And the major landforms are the Himalayan mountains and the Altai mountains because they were natural barriers, and then also the Gobi Desert. Next up, Mesoamerica, or as you know, it can also be called the early Americans. So main things about the Mayans is they used the slash and burn technique where they would cut down all the trees and stuff to make the land there totally flat, and then they would burn it because then they would get the nutrients from the ashes of what they burned. They're also located near on the Yucatan Peninsula. The Aztecs used chinampas as their technique, and also they had Lake Texcoco. It totally auto-corrected me, but it should be Texcoco, or however it's actually supposed to be pronounced. I apologize if I pronounce it incorrectly. And then you also have the Incans, who used terrace farming, and then they also had the Andes Mountains to help, and that definitely benefited them. So next to last is ancient Rome. Again, you had the picture shows Romulus and Remus being really sweet when we both know that, or all of us know, not just two of us, that Romulus was not the nicest man in the world. But their dad was a hero of the Trojan War. He settled in Italy. Romulus was a twin to Remus. He was a legendary hero, and he was the founder of Rome. He built the city around the Palatine Hill. And then Remus, his brother, also helped found Rome, but he was killed by Romulus because they could not agree on the boundaries of where Rome should be. And as you know, they were the legend is that they were raised by a wolf. But after Romulus, there were many Roman kings that ruled Rome. And around 600 BC, the Etruscans conquered Rome. And then 509 BC, Romans overthrew them, and then they formed the Republic, which is a government where people elect the leader. Rome has a really mild climate. It's good for farmland, and it's in a good location. The Latins founded Rome on 7 hills, and they farmed at the bottom of those hills. And Rome's location near the Mediterranean Sea and Tiber River also helped them encourage trade. It's also okay, guys. Sorry, I don't know what happened to my computer, but it wouldn't let me go. So to finish up ancient Rome, it's located in the Italian peninsula. Or oh, I already talked about this one. Sorry. Hold on. Okay, now ancient Greece. In the land of Greece in the islands of the Aegean Sea, it's also off the west coast of Asia Minor, which is now modern-day Turkey. There were lots of valleys that were useful for farming. There were steep slopes, and they were all on small islands. Ancient Greece was literally just everywhere. And then because it had like so many islands and stuff, it allowed them to have many small territories. Most of their cities were located between mountains and narrow coastal plains. And then the city-states that made up ancient Greece were very independent of each other. It was covered in steep hills. There were many colonies that were settled just everywhere, especially like near the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea. It also stretched from coast of Spain to Cyprus and even as far north as Russia and the Ukraine, and then even as far south as Egypt and Libya. Sicily and southern Italy were major places when it came to the Greek colonization. And then also you learned about how it says Alexander the Greek, and it should be Alexander the Greek. Great, I'll have to go fix that for y'all. Took Greek civilization right across into the Middle East, and it allowed them to mingle more with ancient cultures of that region and to form a hybrid civilization. All right, hopefully this helps you quite a bit with your test. You're going to do great. Good luck.